Hello, this is Simpatico's General Data Protection Regulation Business Briefing, where we'll answer your key questions about the new legislation and boil down the 99 articles. We've read them so you don't have to into something as easy as digestible as possible. So whether you've maybe heard of the regulation but are just not sure of some of the specifics, or you're really looking for some advice on what to do now for your business, even if you haven't started, then this is the place to come. So bear with me. So GDPR, it's going to be a big change actually for business, and what it's going to do is change how businesses and public sector organisations handle customer information. That's data. And it's going to really strengthen the concept of data protection and place a lot more value on that. And it is a real law. It's not just a directive, so it needs to be taken seriously, and it's going to be enforced. I'll come back to that, how it's going to be enforced later on, from the 25th of May 2018 across all of the EU member states, 28 at current, and it harmonises existing data protection legislation, but it brings it to a much tougher and higher standard. What's new is new rights for people, known as subjects, data subjects, and they've got new rights to access the information that companies hold on them. So something called subject access requests would previously have carried a £10 charge, but the fee's been scrapped and now it's free. And there's also new obligations for businesses for better and more robust data management. At its heart, this is why I think it's a good thing, by the way, philosophically anyway, it puts the citizen, the person, back in control of their own personal data. It must have a purpose. And GDPR really stipulates that privacy should be by design and by default. So not an afterthought. It's a step change for data protection and the biggest and most important change to data privacy regulation in 2 decades, so something to be taken seriously. By the way, that was a picture of North Berwick, the wonderful town I live in. It doesn't really relate to data, but I thought it was a lovely picture. And here comes a lovely picture of some stars from NASA. So anyway, on to Brexit. What about Brexit, I hear you ask? It's not a get out clause for compliance, I'm afraid, because Brexit doesn't really change much, because this law has already been agreed and it's ready for enforcement, so it kind of doesn't work like that. And anyway, as a business, if you are a data controller and you process data about individuals in the context of selling goods and services to citizens in other EU countries, so you're kind of selling your goods to them, then you need to comply irrespective of not or whether the UK retains GDPR. When we Brexit. And in any case as well, the UK is implementing a new data protection bill, largely including GDPR provisions. I think it's actually very similar, having had a look at what they're planning there. And so even if your business's activities are limited to the UK best practice, again, you have to comply to those kind of key tenets. And a kind of final point is it's a really great baseline for global businesses or those outside the EU who want access to that lucrative EU digital market. Okay, so now let's talk about the who. Who does GDPR affect? What are the key roles? For an in-depth diagnostic for your business, do get in touch. But in general terms, it's for businesses who process or hold or both personal data of EU data subjects, EU people, individuals. The data controller, they're typically the business who decides how the personal data will be used. It's different from the data processor, who actually does the processing of the personal data, but they'll do it on behalf of the data controller. So the key here is that there's joint liability. The data subjects, the people, a kind of natural person within the EU, as it were, the ones under 16, in other words, kids, a key point is that they need parental consent for online activities which process their personal data. So that's a big one for social media. I have separate material about the impact for social media in general if you're interested there. DPOs, do you need one? Well, only if you're a public authority or you're an organisation engaged in large-scale monitoring of processing of personal sensitive data. Again, if you want more detail on that, please do get in touch. So this is about accountability, responsibility, and doing the right thing. And if the worst happens, I'm afraid you can't delay. You have 72 hours to notify the DPA and the individual affected. So it's about complying but being agile. So again, if you need help with that, get in touch. So what are the penalties? Who enforces? This does represent a new tougher fines regime, which is going to be enforced by the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office. And it's quite substantial, up to 4% of annual global turnover, or 20 million euros. Not insignificant, but there is a tiered approach. So the 4% would be for like lack of consent or violating the core of privacy by design concepts. It would be down to 2% for not having your records in order. So to put this in context, you remember TalkTalk, their fine last year of £400,000, which seemed quite a lot of money, not to mention the brand damage that was caused. But anyway, that would have been 59 million under the new regulations. Wow. And yes, they will use their powers. And in fact, predictions by Oliver Wyman is that the EU could collect as much as $6 billion in fines and penalties in the first year alone. Right, on to personal data. What is it? It's becoming kind of a bigger term actually, and it's information relating to a data subject which can identify that person directly or indirectly, and it just got a whole lot broader. So defining it is a bit of a challenge. It's not just email address and so forth, but it's also cultural, economic information, social identity and so forth. So again, if you want more depth on that, do get in touch. What should you do now? Well, do something, act now, have a plan if you don't have one, and be strategic about the way that you think about data and privacy. It's not an afterthought. If your business is involved with customer information, you need to take it seriously. If you haven't started, this is now November, so you have 6 months at time of talking. You might be watching this later, but if you haven't started and there's still time, then start by baselining where you are now. Audit where your data is. How is it being used? Assess any risk. Does that square with where you are as an organisation in terms of risk appetite? You've got to make sure that data is safely and securely managed through your organisation, and understand what happens to outside your organisation. So this is about having lean, slick, streamlined, workable processes, not just on paper and policies on paper. They need to be tested so that they're robust. You have a responsibility. I'm not trying to lecture here, but you do have a responsibility to avoid risk and be transparent to the data subject. But double-edged sword, isn't it? Again, be agile enough to support rapid incident management, reporting, to support things like when data subjects, if they ask to remove under a right to be forgotten or receive their data, so that's data portability, are your processes set up to enable that? Do they work? Test them. This is about kind of real life, test it in anger, get some muscle memory there. All know what they said about assumption. Don't assume. This is your customer, so it's your business, it's the core of your business. Don't assume that they're happy, your customers or prospects, to have their data used in a way which they haven't signed up for, which they haven't consented. That's the big thing. So an email marketing campaign, that's right in the heart of that. The GDPR requires that one of the 6 categories of the legal basis for the processing of personal data are in place. So if you have a doubt about that, I would say don't do it. Or another option, it would be, run a consent campaign, talk to your customers, explain why you're doing it, then record that consent, it's crucial, and audit and make sure it's auditable. Unfortunately, you can't just outsource this thing. So as a data controller, you have an understanding. You must have an understanding of how your supply chain handles privacy information, and you do need privacy clauses and contracts to support that. So, make sure that you're comfortable who you are, who are supplying to you, and what they're doing. And if in doubt, again, I would urge you to streamline your supplier processes, and kind of be wary against complication there. There is a need for awareness with your key people, with HR, marketing and IT, for example. So there's a need to deliver training. And then there's no point having awareness without accountability. So making sure that the roles and responsibilities for your team members are really clear. So it's about trust. It's about your customers, about your brand. So I would urge you to do the right thing and be transparent. So this slide is from the ICO. It's the 12 steps to take now. You can go to ico.org.uk for more information, but that kind of covers some of the things that I talked about and a little bit more. So do you need help for training, for workshop facilitations, for GDPR diagnostics, for consultancy? My approach is very much about a balanced approach. It's about understanding the need for marketing, the need to grow your business, but also remain safe and compliant. So protecting your brand while also growing it. So if you need someone to help you out who has had the experience of the brand and marketing side, but also has cyber and IT qualifications, as well as understanding the level of the detail, then do get in touch. It's www.simpaticoconsulting.co.uk, and my name's Sorsha. Thank you.